Hi there, my name is Jesse, and I'm the practicing BIM manager here teaching you Revit for free. Understanding how to build families is incredibly important. They help you understand the program in such a deeper level. It's how I learned Revit, and how I would encourage other people to start learning Revit as well. At least some of the basics. So what we're going to start with is a simple 2D family, just something that will show up in one particular view and we'll get the ball rolling in understanding reference planes and parameters and how to put everything together to make it useful. What we're going to do is we're going to start with new, and then we're going to go to detail item. Click open. So right off the bat, what we're given here is our drawing space, and these are reference planes. Reference planes are incredibly important. These two starting ones are the ones that currently define the origin. This is the insertion point for when you're placing the component and is where the component will rotate around that particular intersection of those 2 points. Now, a reference plane is something that doesn't print, as in it doesn't come through invisibly. It comes through in interaction. I'm gonna be drawing something up here. We're gonna start with a piece of timber dimensional lumber. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna build a framework. I can either click on the reference plane and come up here and go create similar. It's a really useful tool. Otherwise, I can go create and go to reference plane. Now up here, I'm gonna be building these in this quadrant, and you can see this is 1200 millimeters. This is gigantic. This is not the final size, but this is a starting point for us now. Can click on modifier, hit escape. Also, you should check out my UI deep dive if you're brand new to this program. I highly recommend. Now, after I build my reference planes, I can start adding in some dimensions. The dimensions are really useful because we will turn them into parameters, and that's just done by clicking on this reference plane and going create parameter. But hold on. As per usual, I'm getting ahead of myself. We need to save this family. We really need to save this family, because right now it's just family 1. File, save as, family. And inside my families folder, I'm going to save this as timber framing. We can use spaces, that's fine. And hit save. Now we can get into adding parameters. So this parameter here, I can go and I can create parameter, because right now there's no labels, there's no options, no parameters have been created in this family yet. So I will click create parameter, and I will call this width. This will be a type parameter. Also, check out my deep dive on type versus instance parameters as an intro to understanding what the difference between these are. Really useful video. And it's under the group parameter group dimensions, which is great. We don't really need to get into most of these for now. Dimensions is just fine. So I will call this height and hit OK. Now I've got my parameters set up, and if we come over to here to the family types, this is where we can see, this is where all of the parameters that we have access to will be interacted with. So first and foremost, if I first give this height, what are we, 45, and the width 90, and click OK, that'll automatically update these guys. So I can slide this back down and this over, and now this is what we're going to be working with. It doesn't really matter how long out these reference planes are. You can pull them in and make them tidy, but it's not overly necessary because when you load them in, the reference planes will stop relative to the size of the object you have, and I'll show you examples of that when we get into it. Well, we've got the bounds of our box set up, so let's go to create, and let's go to filled region. I don't generally use a masking region because a masking region will sometimes or often hide over top of additional lines you put in place, and it's just a mess. So filled region it is, And we've got to do something to pick the type of filled region that we're going to use. But first, let me just draw this. I can start sketching things and I can draw it big and align the lines, but the most efficient way for me to do this is click on this Pick Lines tool and then click Lock. So this is automatically going to lock the lines that I draw to the reference planes or to the reference that was used to draw something. This can be reference planes or it can be other lines. In this case, we're just using these reference planes. You see that lock shows up. It's picking this whole line, which is a lot, but we're just going to use the trim tool. So hit Escape twice, usually, to make sure you're out of whatever command you might be in, and then go TR. These are the only keyboard commands that I really use a lot of, is the ones meant for modification and drawing, like in AutoCAD. So trim or extend, click on that one, and I'm going to click on the two sides of the lines that I want to keep. So I'm going to click on that one, and 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 that one. Now, if these can't be trimmed, you can still, it just won't let you click that other line. So I can click on that line. If I click somewhere else, it'll deselect the first line, and then I can click on that one, and now it's trimmed this up all really nicely. I can hit the check mark, but a couple things. First off, if I turn off my thin lines, I get this relatively thick box, which is fine for now, but I have a concrete hatch. It's not ideal, so I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to go Edit Type. I've got my concrete hatch here, but I don't actually have a solid white, which is what I'm looking for. And so what I will do is I will go Duplicate, and I'll call this white. Could go white solid, but solid white, but white's fine. Now, before I change this to solid, if I change this to a solid fill and click OK, this masking option gets grayed out. Not entirely sure. If I change it to something else and then I untick this box, now I can go solid fill and it's not a masking region. So I can change the background color to white and OK. And actually, this is the foreground color. Let's foreground fill. So let's just make these both white, and then take this, click on this little box in the corner to get the options for this this field, and then you can click solid fill. That's it for that that filled region, which is one of the only times you should ever be using a filled region. All right, now, after we build the filled region, we're gonna need some lines, and we want that cross, that X in the middle, so that it denotes this as a piece of dimensional lumber. When I start drawing lines, it will pick this grip. It's the highlighted endpoint is the thing that it is going to marry itself to. This right now endpoint, if I hit Tab, it'll cycle through different options. So the first one is the endpoint of this line. Otherwise, it's the endpoint of that line. At the moment, those are the same point because they are connected. If I hit Tab a couple more times, this is the nearest, which is not the greatest one to use unless you're working with curves and such. If you keep cycling through, there's sometimes a couple other ones. You can get to a midpoint, that's the triangle. But I don't need to hit Tab or anything. I'm just going to click on this one and go endpoint, and then come over to this one and have endpoint. I'll hit escape once. This is why we double tap the escape, is because sometimes you'll be in multiple layers of a command. We're still using the line tool right now, so that's great. And then we can click on that corner and then that corner. Now if I hit escape twice, I'm outside of that. I can click on this 90, and then the same way that we came over here and we changed the numbers in here, I can change the numbers right here. I can drag this, but sometimes that'll break things. Sometimes things just won't move the way that you expect them to inside the program. So inside the family, if I hit undo, inside the project, the way that the program knows to change things is by changing the actual numbers. If I click on 90 here, I can change this to 120, hit enter, and then it's moved it. This is called flexing the family. We flex the family to make sure that everything moved the way that we expect it to. Now, if I change this down to 60, what I like to do is I pick a bigger number and then a smaller number of what I had when I drew things, and that way I can see if it grows and if it shrinks. When these families become more complicated, this becomes absolutely essential. So please flex your families. It's really important. So we're just going to flex things both in both directions. Lovely. I'll hit undo twice, and we're back to where we're at. Now, the lines here aren't technically the same thickness as what you're actually going to see inside a project. So there is a little bit of kind of just playing with things. If we're not going to get into line weights and all of that yet. But we do want a thicker line around this border. So if I select my filled region and I either click edit boundary or I double click on this, I can go into the sketch mode. Now while we're in the sketch mode, I can't modify anything else, that's fine, but I can grab all of these lines and I can change the subcategory of these lines. These are different line types. So right now it's just on detail items. I'm gonna click medium lines, and this is gonna get really thick, and then I'm gonna hit the check mark, and then we're gonna come out. And again, the line weight size that you're seeing is jumping around. This isn't the line weight that you're actually gonna see inside the project. Even at 1 to 10, if we change this to 1 to 5, it changes as well. Anyway, we can leave these ones as detail items. Actually, let's hold control and select both of those. Let's make them light lines. So now we've got some things selected. We're pretty happy with how this is looking. Let's load this into the project. Ooh, I'm going to open up a brand new project because we're still working with just Revit out of the box, the architectural template. That was fast. All right, here we've got a floor plan that we're looking at, and back in here, we've got our timber framing. Now, if I load this into project, it'll bring it straight in. Now, we're at 1 to 100, which is why the line weights are quite thick. If we place this, hit escape a couple times, change this down to 1 to 5, you can see that the line weights are different than what you're seeing inside the project and what you're seeing inside here. So ultimately, the project defines what the thin or medium or whatever line weights that you're working with. So you can get into that if you want to be more specific. Anyway, this family here, if I go create similar, so I'm making the same one that was just brought in, or I can hit escape and I can come over to the annotate tab and find component. So this will be here in my list of components, possible components that I can place. A lot of these are all the standard detail items that Revit gives you for free. I don't use any of them. I've built all of the families that I use because I have control and I have consistency and I can name things a very specific way and I know exactly how they're going to look. So when we named the family, that gave us the name that we're going to see inside here. Now, the name of the actual family is the one in the gray box. This is technically the name of the first type of that family. And we can have multiple types, so we can have multiple sizes all within there, and that's why we use type parameters. So if I click on timber framing, I can start drawing more of these, and I can click, click, click. We don't need too many of those, but you can see that where my pointer is in the bottom left corner of the timber framing, that was the insertion point, the origin, point of origin. So if I hit the space bar, it's going to rotate this object by 90 degrees. And it rotates it on that origin. So I can hit it a bunch of times and I can come back to normal. Now, if I'm hovering over another line, just as a side note, and I hit the space bar, it's going to align it to that and then start doing 90 degrees rotations based on how you move your mouse and hit the space bar. I can also recognize other things, and what it's doing right now is it's actually recognizing the reference plane of the other detail component, which is the same one. Anyway, so I can place that one on there, and I can try to place another one on here, but for some reason it doesn't like stacking a bunch of the freshly placed ones. So if I hit escape and go create similar, I can place another one on there, or yeah, just annoying little drafting things. So now if I go back and click edit family, it's just going to bump me back over into this window. Or I could just click on that tab and come back to this. Now I've got my types here, but I want to set up a couple different options. So I want a 45 by 90 and I want a 45 by 140. These are standard dimensional lumber sizes, and so they're really useful to have. So I've got my 45 and my 90 here, but how do I get a bunch of options? I come over here and I click on New Type. New Type, I can call this 45 space 90, whoops. Let's put an X in there. 45 by 90. Really simple. I don't have to say timber framing in here again because it's already set up there at the top. And now I have my options set up. Now if I click this again, I can go 45 by 140 and click OK. And now that this is the current option of the types that I have selected, I can change this to 140. Click somewhere else, let it accept it, and now if I come back to this one, it'll keep that number as it was. So then I can come back to this guy and see the different options. If I click apply, it'll use that as the current one in my project, and I can change that to 90 and hit apply, and that'll be the active dimensions that I'm working with inside this project. Now, I will load this back into the project, and this is really important, is to overwrite the existing version. Unless you really know what you're doing, just don't choose this bottom option. Basically, if you're making a bunch of changes and updating type parameters and stuff inside the project, you probably want to keep the selections and way you have things organized inside the project. If you go into the family, update a bunch of things, and you want to push through the parameter values that you had inside the project, inside the family, you might be making a mess of something that somebody's already integrated into your project. So if you don't know what you're doing and you're not super confident, just click the top version. You will almost never notice anything different. All right, so when I click on this now, I can see that I've got timber framing, but it's actually keeping the original name from the family because we hadn't defined any types. So it just went, oh, okay, well, it's just the same thing. So I've got timber framing here, but now I've got these 3 types. But inside my family, I've actually only got the 2 types. Well, that's just because inside the project, the family exists and is a replica version of the family that you created, and doesn't actually have to be saved anywhere. So you can have a whole bunch of families all up inside a project. You can give somebody the project and they'll have all of those families because they exist. Technically, it is separate from the one that is saved onto your computer in your files. Now, I don't want to see that third name. I can come over to here into my project browser, click on this, expand that, come down to detail items, expand that, and now down at the bottom, I've got timber framing. I can expand that one more time, right click on this one, and hit delete. It's saying, oh, I'm going to delete a thing because there's actually an instance inside the project here. So this is just saying one instance will be deleted. These are really useful to read, the pop-ups. A lot of people just click OK or whatever, and there's a lot of information that you can be missing out on. So I'm going to click OK. It's going to delete the one that I had in there because it was the one under timber framing. But I now have these 2 options. While I'm over here, I can grab one of these and I can drag it in and I can place that. I can hit escape and I can drag this one in and I can place that. These are 2 different versions of the same thing, but they're different types. So I can click edit type and I can see the name that I put into it before. And these are the numbers that I added for the parameters that I had inside the project. And then I can click on this one, and since I've got this one selected and I changed its type to this one and hit OK, it'll change to that type as well. Now, we often in Revit use a lot of detail components when we're doing details, and this important reason for this is because we can keynote all of these components. And this way, if I note something on my drawing, then I have consistency. This 45 by 90 timber framing, I might add something to the end of that name, duplicate it, and call it internal or external framing, because normally I'm going to end up associating a different actual keynote with that element, because internal framing and external framing is probably going to be treated differently, and it will be in a different use in a different environment, even though technically it's still just dimensional lumber. So when I have a family here, I can click edit type and I can come over to here and see that right now there's nothing selected for keynotes. I haven't loaded a Keynote file, but it's really good to keep this in mind for when you're creating things is how am I going to be using this in the future? And a lot of practices will be using Keynotes because it's a very good way of working. So with that in mind, if I hit cancel, I can go into my family here and go into my types. And right now I've got 45 by 90. But I actually want another one that is 45 by 90, but is for nogging. So that's got a different graphic representation because it is meaning to show that the piece of timber is actually broken up because it's in between studs. So I'm going to go 45 by 90 and then go nogging and click OK. And that's fine. The size is fine because I kept it. I had it active when I made the new one. Probably don't need 140 nogging. It's not used all that often. So we're just going to go with the 90 right now, and then we're going to click OK. Now, I want one of these lines to be an option. And right now, I'm going to come over to my Properties panel, and I'm going to see this visible section here. I can tick that and just turn it off, and it's just not visible. It's an invisible line now at this point, technically. It just won't show up or be useful inside the project, but I want to make that an option. So this little box over here is associate a family parameter. I don't know why they made this so tiny and hard to find, but now that you know. So this opens up a list of visibility parameters that all have a yes or no parameter type. I don't have any in this project, so I will click on this new parameter, and I will go nogging viz. I like to just say viz for visibility. And it'll be under the other category. That makes sense, that's fine. It's just kind of, actually, no, there's a visibility one. We'll leave it in visibility. So click OK. Now we have a visibility parameter. We can click OK. And now this is inherently tied to that. And by default, it's off because it was unticked visible when I created the parameter. So it accepted the status that it was in when it was created. Now I can come back to my family types, and we've got a new parameter inside our list over here. And by default, it's off, which is great for nogging because I don't want it to be on. It's just the one line. We'll come and check the other ones, and by default, since it's off, I need to go into each of these and tick this box back on. This can be annoying if you've got a whole bunch of different types and you add a parameter late in the game. Then you have to go through and check every single family type, make sure that it's either on or off or whatever size you need it to be. So this is why we like to build a framework first. We like to know what we're going to be getting into, set up all our parameters, and then you can start to create the different versions of the things that you need. Click OK, and now this is the option that we have. This is the nogging version. We can come over here, go back to 90, and that will be back to our default. Now if I load this into project and just overwrite existing version, because we didn't really actually change much, we just added things. Now I've got my additional new my new family type over here, and if I go to annotate and component and then click on nogging, I can place my nogging. Now, what if I want to align something with the center line of this? What's the easiest way to do that? Well, yes, there is the midpoint, and I can use that, but what if I want to align something with 2/3? For whatever reason, let's say you've got a component that you need to align something incrementally or whichever, or in the middle, which isn't exactly a midpoint of a line. If we go back into the family, we can create a new reference plane. In this reference plane, I'm just going to roughly place it in the center. It doesn't really matter because we will end up putting a new set of dimensions that will make this stay equals distance from either side. So when I'm placing a new dimension like this, again, Revit can get a little funny with the order of operations, the order of when you click things. So typically when I'm going to make an equals dimension, I will pick the outside bounds and then the center point, and then I can click somewhere else and it will accept where it is. Hiding behind the dimension up there is the equals button, and if I click on this, these are now equal. So when this changes and I go 150, that stays exactly in the middle. Side note, since I changed the width to 150, it has changed it for this family type, which right now is 90, and it's saying, right now it's saying 90, but it was 150 because I changed that number in the drawing space. Now I can click on this and just go create similar, or click on the measure, or the measure, place both of those, find the equals equals, and now we have our family. Depends on how you like to order things, but being consistent is nice. All right, now that we've got these reference planes in here, let's load this back into the project, overwrite existing version. Click on this and go create similar. Now there's an invisible line that shows up when I'm placing things. And you can see that the line only extends to the outermost bound of the family itself. So sometimes if you want an invisible line that you want to be able to align to, dimension to, that's an important part. If I want to be able to dimension to this one, now I have those abilities. I can delete this because that's unnecessary. One last thing about these reference planes, I can click on this one and I can leave these as a weak reference. It just has to do with how it attaches or how it wants to snap to when you're choosing things like dimensions. This isn't super important, but these guys are actually fairly important. This is a reference front and back. Actually, yeah, we can also name each of these reference planes. So if I wanted to call this top and I wanted to call this one right, I could zoom out and click to rename, or add the name into the identity box over here. Not super important, but with both of these, if I hold Control and select both, I can make these a strong reference, or I can actually pick from the options here and just call this right. But I don't really need to do that. That gets useful in the future when we're making more complicated things, because when you have a reference plane that is named, you can reference it in ways that you draw things. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, feel free to ask me questions. If anything didn't make sense, please comment. That would be really useful, and I can either address that in another video or whatever. Anyway, thanks for learning with me. I want to provide you the best content possible, so please, unfortunately, I have to ask you to subscribe. I do highly recommend it, and I will be coming out with a lot more content in the very near future. All the best. All right, one last bit of information is the preview of your family. Now, this is only really useful if you're using certain content management systems, but the one that Revit just bought, Unify, doesn't really matter because it automatically does this for you. But if you're pedantic and you like things to be very clean and tidy, then this might be for you. So it was taking the preview from this, just the overall of what you see in the family. We can go over to View and click on Visibility Graphics, or let escape, hit VV or VG as the keyboard commands, and go to Annotation Categories, untick that box, click OK. Now nothing's actually showing up there. I can hit Save, close that again, and now that's the preview for it.